Here was given the order, retreat only on stretchers.
I was in charge of radio, and I had to get my material and write my reportages from the front line. And General Monter, who was in charge of the fightings, was planning to break through the German lines to make possible for the people who were surrounded in the old town to break through, to save their lives, and to join the center of the city, which was still a very strong stronghold. The commander of this soldier who was there came to Monter and said, the street is under German fire. We will not get through, sir. And he said, the order is the order, period. You don't count the casualties, you just go forward and implement my order. He said, rozkaz, panie generale. He said, the order, yes, I will follow your order. And then, you know, I saw this man without legs, who was dying. And he said to Monter in my presence, I did carry the order, sir.
Maria Sudis, one of the bravest women of the uprising, was critically injured when taken prisoner by the Germans. She was asked provocatively, are you a bandit? I am a soldier of the Home Army, she responded with dignity. Then she was shot.
The thing which I realized during the uprising, that the Germans were not Superman. I was not any less human than they were. That my bullet, when it hit a German soldier, would drop him as sure enough as the bullet would drop one of us.
At a celebration of military leaders, Heinrich Himmler said, this has been the hardest battle we have fought since the war's beginning. It is comparable only to the fight for every home in Stalingrad.
In Stalingrad, it was two professional armies arrayed against one another. In Warsaw, there were also civilians and a bunch of underarmed guerrillas.
The scale of the fighting, its intensity, the level of casualties was staggering. And last but not least, the level of casualties inflicted on the Nazis was also surprisingly high.
In the yards, on dug-up sidewalks, and everywhere were fresh graves. More and more writings could be found on the walls, pointing out mass graves of people buried under the rubble. During the night of September 15th, a troop of Polish soldiers dispatched from the Red Army crossed the Vistula River into the fighting city. Stalin formed the division for Polish citizens recently released from the Siberian Gulag. These were poorly trained soldiers, unprepared for urban warfare. Their struggle ended in disaster, with over 3,000 dead.
Finally, the British decided to take risks, considerable risks, and to drop some ammunition, some even food and weapons.
On September 18th, 110 American flying fortresses appeared above Warsaw. 1,300 containers were dropped, of which only 228 were appropriated by resistors. Alas, this help came too late.
When Churchill got extremely angry at the fact that the Soviets were obstructing the Western airlift, the British and American planes which were flying help to Warsaw, when Churchill got very angry at that and requested that Roosevelt join him in a joint protest, Roosevelt declined.
And the whole sky was filled with parachutes and with food and weapons and ammunition, and Warsaw Yard was jumping up in the air and crying out of happiness. And it was that spirit, knowing that we are defending our sisters, our girlfriends, our mothers and our fathers, that made us fight to the last.
The uprising was the greatest armed operation in Poland's underground, as well as the greatest military operation undertaken by any civilian resistance movement in Europe during World War II. During the 2-month inferno, 16,000 soldiers from the uprising were killed, while 25,000 were wounded. Civilian losses were appalling. Over 180,000 civilians lost their lives in mass executions or under the ruins. Germans suffered 26,000 casualties, 10,000 killed, 7,000 missing in action, and 9,000 wounded. After the final surrender, the 500,000 remaining inhabitants of Warsaw were forcibly ejected from the city into labor camps. The Germans then began the methodical destruction of the capital.
And it's this failure of the Allied coalition to organize a rescue, having 9 weeks to do so, a very long time, 9 weeks in which Warsaw could have been saved, and yet the Western powers and the Soviet Union couldn't reach an agreement, and the city was allowed to die.
The Poles fought in solitude, they fought alone, and they were basically abandoned.
It was coming. I knew that it was a problem of matter of hours or even days. I thought that this will be the end of our life. I never believed that I will survive it.
The 2nd of October 1944, an agreement to cease military operations in Warsaw is signed.
After we had no more munition, no more food, and no more hope that we will get any help, our commander-in-chief decided to accept the honorable terms of surrender.
One of the key points of the capitulation agreement with the Germans was that the Home Army underground fighters should be treated as legal combatants, and that they should pass after surrender into regular prisoner of war camps run not by the SS but by the Wehrmacht. And that indeed happened. On the other hand, the Soviet side, which was in the immediate vicinity of Warsaw, continued to act as the SS had done, calling the underground resistant fighters bandits, rounding them up, shooting them, deporting them to Russia whenever they came across them. And this is, of course, an amazing, an outrageous fact that the allies of the Western powers came to be treated better by the Nazi SS than by the Soviet forces, who were, of course, our allies.
The Nazis left a so-called Vernichtungskommando, the destruction teams, which went block by block, burning and blowing up whatever had not been bombed out or shelled out. They destroyed Warsaw building by building.
The legacy of the Warsaw Uprising is still painfully alive. The city stands on the graves of the insurgents and civilians that perished during the 63 bloodiest days in the country's history. The questions are easy to ask, but difficult to answer. Was the sacrifice necessary?
The question should be as follows. What came out of it? On the one hand, death, destruction, more of the romantic tradition of dying